Hello and welcome back to AWS On Air. Again, the official live streaming track here at reInvent 2020. Rob, we are here to do what we have done on each day of reInvent, and that is to close out and try to recap everything that has happened today. No keynote today, but certainly some still exciting things for folks that have been moseying around in the online platform, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a tall order for a recap, really. We have 30 minutes to sum up all the action going on today. And just because there's no keynote doesn't mean that it's a slow day by any means. We had a number of deep dives, a number of really great sessions that were just released on the platform. And what we really want this section for is, those of you who can't make it to the daily programming, or you just need a little pointer for where to get started to dive into some of the content that we personally find interesting. That's what this show is for. So, we hope that it's a helpful way to digest everything that's happening at reInvent.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a few things we're going to talk through today. Again, I mentioned no keynote, but there was a executive leadership session. There were a handful of sessions that I know you have come through and picked out to highlight. There were some other launches that we didn't get to talk about yesterday that were not in the keynote that I figured we could get to today. And that should take us about through the entire 30 minutes. But before we get into all of that, why don't we recap everything that actually has gone on today in here in the live channel. So let's zoom in here. Got the screen share. Again, this is the live blog post for AWS On Air. This is going to showcase all of the content that we'll be having. This is going to be updated continuously throughout reInvent. So looking all the way down here, it is Wednesday. So we saw some what's next sessions, diving deep with the service teams on some of the latest launches here in Amazon Monotron, AWS Glue, Elastic Views, EKS Managed Add-ons and Dashboard. Then we got to hear from some exciting customer use cases. I sat down with customers in the automotive, energy, and health space in the Canadian Institute of Health and Information, blanking on some of the other ones, but those will be available on demand if you missed them the first time around. Following that, we saw some more sessions here in what's next. So again, more deep dives. Again, if you saw this the first time in a keynote announcement, you maybe checked out the session that was available. These what's next sessions are a great way to get some of your questions answered and to see some of the motivation and direction that these services come from. Again, hearing firsthand from the teams that deliver these services themselves. Wow, yeah, certainly a packed day for those what's next sessions, with all in the field agriculture special edition sprinkled in and taking us through to us here in the daily recap. So a long day of service team interviews and demos here on the What's Next channel.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I mean, I think this program really is just a great way to kind of have a halfway mark. The platform itself has just a huge catalog of content. It's constantly being added to every day. And then there's all this on-demand content that you can consume. And that's really what we want you to do with the platform, to kind of explore, to look for keywords that interest you. And then, as Nick mentioned, the AWS On-Air programming that we have here, live programming every day, where we kind of have a little bit more of a live interaction in some cases. We can do more Q&A style sessions, but really the two are kind of designed to be complementary.
Exactly. So again, if you're just tuning in now, or you happen to miss some of the content that was available today, that will be available on demand. But if you're here, sit down and stay a while. We're going to try and recap some of the most exciting bits from today. So I'm going to dive right in, Rob, if that's okay, and talk a little bit about the executive leadership session that we kicked today off. Again, today being Wednesday, no keynote today. We have the infrastructure keynote coming tomorrow, but we did get to hear from Rahul Pathak, VP of Analytics here at AWS. And Rob, there was one particular launch that Rahul talked about that was my favorite. And we're going to try this again, see if it works today.
Oh,
It's nice. This bad boy right here. And, hold on, make sure I'm not in the way, make sure it's not falling over. The new Amazon EMR support for EKS. So lot to unpack here. This is a very exciting blog post. I'm not going to sit here and do a read along because that's what the blog post is for. But largely, let's walk through the benefits of this and why this announcement is so exciting. In plain English, what this launch enables customers to do is to deploy EMR applications or EMR jobs directly to EKS clusters. Again, EMR being our managed distributed data analysis service, and EKS being Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service. So really what this is bridging is it is bringing EMR and the power and the bindings that service has provided for customers, and allows customers that are using Kubernetes and EKS to manage their deployments and their other infrastructure nodes and pods, and it enables them to now run EMR jobs within EKS, which previously were sort of isolated from one another. So customers that were running all their stuff over in EKS and Kubernetes, they didn't. There were some friction, some challenges with having these separate data processing pipelines through EMR. And this launch now enables customers to have that sort of all in one place, which if you're already using Kubernetes, you probably want to bring as much of your infrastructure into that management umbrella as possible.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think this is a fairly common use case for EKS, where customers have these longer running distributed batch jobs that a containerized infrastructure is perfect for, right? And then whereas you start looking toward the other two ends around containers, our compute platform, again, a quick reminder, we think of the compute platform as breaking down into three categories: instances, containers, and serverless. And so EKS falls squarely within the containers offering, and EMR for containers is the perfect fit because it doesn't really mesh very well with the serverless concepts. And then you also have instances which are a little bit too hands-on. There's not enough abstraction there to kind of get you to where you're going as quickly as possible. So we see a lot of customers doing this already, and this feels like a great way to get more value out of your EKS cluster.
Yeah, exactly. And for folks that are interested in fully serverless ETL or data processing, AWS Glue does exactly that. But for certain frameworks like Spark processing jobs or Hive or various distributed data or distributed processing frameworks, applications that customers are running, and they've enjoyed having those managed through EMR, bringing those sort of into the fold here to be able to more deeply manage from within an EKS cluster is really just enabling customers to run the infrastructure in the way that they like. Again, that's the reason why they're already using EKS. And so eliminating this barrier is eliminates a lot of duplicated sort of pipelines that you may have to run, or unnecessary friction of having some of that infrastructure live elsewhere. But there are some really cool performance benefits to this as well, namely that customers that had to do this sort of split architecture where EMR jobs and applications would live outside the EKS cluster, you either have that scenario where it's, again, they're sort of decoupled, or you have another scenario where you choose to run some of these some of the open source variants in a self-managed form of some of these popular frameworks that I mentioned before, again, like Spark, Hive, Flink, I believe also HBase, Hootie, and Presto. If you choose to then install the open source variants of these and run and manage them, and again try to tune the performance of these within your EKS cluster, you'll get expected behavior. But what's one of the biggest performance benefits here is that by running optimized versions of these frameworks through EMR, customers now sort of get the best of both worlds. They get up to 3 times better performance for EMR optimized Spark jobs, and get all of the ability to tune and manage that all directly within EKS. So again, a scenario where customers have had to make a choice where they kind of have wanted the best of both worlds, and this launch really just feels like a delivering on that exact experience.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool, and definitely will be interesting for customers already running on EKS, or if you're running on EMR already and you want to see ways to kind of have a little bit more control over your infrastructure or repurpose your infrastructure for other things.
Yeah.
I understand that there was another SageMaker launch that was separate from the keynote. What's that all about?
Yeah, exactly. I'll talk as I'm ripping down the green screen so that people don't confuse them. But
Okay.
As if, Rob, we don't get enough talking time on the machine learning keynote day to talk about all of the exciting keynotes here, or all the exciting launches in SageMaker world. There is yet another one that we did not cover. And it's actually one that you may have missed because it wasn't actually referenced in the keynote. And that is Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart. So what Jumpstart is it is a set of common machine learning solutions, and I'll clarify what I mean by solutions in just a second, for solving common problems using machine learning. So again, sort of very, very quickly and broadly, in these machine learning problems, you have a particular set of data. There is some sort of algorithm in which you apply to that data to train a model, which is then optimized for a particular performance metric. You then, once you have this model, you can then perform inferences against it. Now, if that sounds like a lot of steps in a pipeline, you're correct. It's very difficult there to do, especially the first time. And so what SageMaker Jumpstart essentially does is it says, okay, well, regardless of what your vertical or your business problem is, there's only a handful of discrete common machine learning problems. This could be identification of an object in an image. This could be anomaly detection in time series data, or for something like fraud detection. This could be something like multi-class classification. And regardless of what type of data you have or what your business vertical is, implementing an end-to-end pipeline involves a lot that has very little to do with that particular business use case. And so the power of SageMaker Jumpstart is by going into SageMaker Studio, you can now select one of this large collection of models. We refer to them as a model zoo. And what this basically enables you to do is to stand up this end-to-end pipeline with a fully functional example. So, for example, let's say I want to classify between, various brands of apparel logos. It's a multi-class classification problem. There's probably a SageMaker Jumpstart for image detection and multi-classification. And all I would really have to do is I'd go into that training notebook. It has all of the code necessary. It pulls in that data set from S3, and I'd simply substitute my S3 data set with my manifest for those labels and all of the other plumbing that come into machine learning to make that possible in production, from inference, from serving inferences to calling SageMaker to perform the training and outputting the model. All of that's largely handled. So there's two main people that I think are going to be most excited about SageMaker Jumpstart. The first of which is folks that are trying to get their feet wet with either a new type of machine learning problem or machine learning for the first time. They can, within just a few clicks, see a working end-to-end example, and it's not completely abstracted away. It's built and stood up for you to modify and see in its entirety. So very exciting there. And the second is the ability for people to not just see an example working notebook, but it's that exact use case I just described, where you have a type of problem that in machine learning is fundamentally common, even if you're using it in a unique way. And you can, with just a few modifications, take one of these Jumpstart solutions and be up and running with an end-to-end pipeline very, very quickly. So very exciting, and largely, it just comes down to making this easily available to customers in SageMaker Studio. But this is really the manifestation of in-house knowledge that we've built here at AWS from working with customers and offering this guidance and these best practices and these common architectural implementations to customers in the form of some pre-built models that they can just select easily with a few clicks.
Yeah, this sounds really interesting because, this kind of reference architecture, reference pipeline, it's really useful as documentation, but it's even more useful as a working solution. So you can go in there and tweak the pieces that you need. One analogy that pops up in my mind is Create React App, right? I know a lot of people have done that. And you remember before Create React App, how everybody complained about JavaScript fatigue because everybody had to go and configure Webpack and Babel and so on and so forth, right? I mean, this feels really similar in that it's not just, hey, here's how to do it. It's taking one step further and saying, here it is, now go and tweak the pieces to your liking.
Precisely. Yeah, it does exactly that. Just like Create React App, it just sort of stands up this end-to-end pipeline where, if a lot of developers will see, configuration or setup as this like big, hairy, discrete step where, like, if they have frustrations along the way and until it's set up, they're not particularly satisfied because it can't really do much, right? And so by standing up the end-to-end pipeline very quickly with a fully with a pre-prescribed solution that is known to work well with best practices is really valuable. And excited to see how customers use that, because again, just further lowering the barrier of entry to get started with this. I would also say that a lot of companies, one of the benefits here is that you can stand up this scaffolding in the form of a working solution. And even if parts of it are subject to change, what this enables your team to do is be more agile. Maybe you have a small team of data scientists, or you have other folks that may manage the data source or the repository for that, or the feature store. By standing up this scaffolding, essentially what you can do is say, all right, well, this API or this handoff of this data, this will be persistent, even if the data I'm going to be sending is going to look different than what this example has. So you can sort of set up the scaffolding and have all parts of your business that will be touching that end-to-end pipeline get started with preparing right away against live endpoints until you take this into production, which otherwise could sort of happen very iteratively and slowly and delay the ultimate rollout of a V1 or a prototype.
Yeah, that's a good call out. You mentioned that these pipelines, different people work on different segments of the pipeline, and that should not be surprising to you at all, right? I mean, this is the same reason why we have dedicated software engineers versus an ops team versus SREs versus testers. Like, there's a lot to be said about specialization in any one of these segments. And I think what that leads to in general is different access models, right? We've talked a lot about security and IAM and the importance of kind of making sure that your access control policies are kind of tied down in terms of the principle of least privilege. But what kinds of features and announcements and tools are you aware of that can help us make sure that we're kind of operating with least privilege, make sure that we're auditing to make sure that we're running based on best practices?
I'm glad you asked. The final launch that I wanted to talk about in our brief little recap today is AWS Audit Manager. Now, I think based on the launch timeline, it may have actually launched yesterday, but again, I didn't see it in the keynote. Maybe I missed it, but figured we should definitely cover it anyway. So let's sort of start with a story, right? You work at an organization that requires some particular type of compliance. And as with most tiers of compliance, there is some sort of recurring check to make sure that you can maintain this status, right? Let's say there's an annual check. And so typically what happens is there is an audit that is performed either internally by your own organization, or an external team comes in and performs an audit against your infrastructure to ensure that, let's say, you need to have certain levels of data governance and security, principles of least permission, and so on and so forth, right? There are a large number of compliance types for different reasons in different industries. Now, this process often involves a lot of manual steps, pulling engineers that are intimately familiar with this architecture off of developing features and onto collecting this evidence and being able to provide essentially a document or a dossier of information to try to achieve or to re-achieve compliance. Now, the launch I want to talk about here is AWS Audit Manager, and it solves this exact problem. It does so in a very simple way. Again, fully managed solution that will help to simplify audit prep. And it does so in a continuous manner, right? So this is not just about, auto-generating a report with one batch upload at the end of the day when it comes audit season. The goal here is to be able to continuously collect evidence. So you're not going back and having to go and manually fetch and manually query these old data sources. That's not how Audit Manager works. What it does is you can configure it to one of a large number of frameworks that it already has that are designed to collect the type of evidence necessary to prove and achieve compliance. So again, part of the challenge with compliance is simply trying to assess and understand that from this set of properties to achieve, like SOC 10, for example, you have to then look and try and say, okay, well, which parts of my infrastructure are applicable here? What types of data could be relevant to this type of level of compliance? There's a lot of manual guesswork. People failing compliance, or organizations failing compliance checks, are not always because there was an inability to meet a certain requirement out of missing something that they thought that they should achieve. It's kind of like the tax system, right? It can be difficult to decode that and actually translate that into actionable steps. Audit Manager helps to sort of take the guesswork and the manual error that can be common in those workflows, and again, tie that more directly to your infrastructure. When it comes time to reporting, because AWS Audit Manager is able to, on a recurring basis, collect this data, and again, depending on the type of compliance you're trying to achieve, this can be everything from access permissions to encryption status to telemetry data about your actual infrastructure itself. Disaster recovery configurations, so on and so forth. All of this, broadly categorized as evidence inside of AWS Audit Manager, can be auto-generated in a report to then file for compliance. So with Audit Manager, the goal here is to collect the right data, collect it continuously so that you don't have to pull engineers off of feature development to be able to do this. And then lastly, to be able to simplify the creation of that actual report, you can, if you have a complicated architecture, or maybe you have data that lives in other silos, maybe on-prem, you can still easily bring that in to Audit Manager and append that onto your report. So really bringing reporting to where the infrastructure is. I know we talk about bringing compute to where the data is, all the time, but this is a challenge a lot of companies face, and it costs a lot in terms of development hours. So really happy to see this.
Yeah, this sounds like a great addition. I mean, this sounds even more powerful when you combine it with other features that we have in the security and access control space. I mean, obviously there's IAM, but beyond IAM, we have guard duty, we have the name, I'm drawing a blank. There's just so many service launches. CloudWatch anomaly detection, right? You can imagine, and detective, right? When you combine all of these, you can kind of see a picture coming together that is really trying to help reduce time to detection for these kinds of incidents, make sure that you're in compliance in all cases. And then in here, Audit Manager really kind of helping streamline the process, because we know that audits are such a common part of the security lifecycle.
Yep, exactly. And, even separate from being able to, have the check mark applied from whatever auditing agency or compliance agency you have, I would venture a guess that a lot of companies would like to have the peace of mind through such a service that they can feel confident that they're likely to re-achieve that compliance status, because they just, again, have this more prescriptive set of guide work. They're continuously collecting data. They can hopefully be able to see preemptively if there are, certain changes to the infrastructure could pull them out of compliance, right? So making this more of a continuous process makes it much less stress-free and much less of a spiky workload come audit time.
Agreed. With the remaining 5 minutes in the recap, what I'd like to do is switch tracks briefly and talk about some of the sessions that I highlighted today. Now, these are, again, caveat, these are kind of my personal picks based on my areas of interest. And the way I'd like you to use these is use them as an entry point to diving into the new content that we have, and even the existing content that's available, right? Once you go in there, start clicking around, start exploring, explore the tracks that are associated with the content here. This is an invitation to start learning and being curious. By no means is this the end. So here we go. Now, Nick, you've known me for a while. What is it? Answer in your mind, what is the single thing that I am most excited about? Like, just answer in your mind, okay? You don't have to say it out loud, all right?
Got it.
It's, you know what it is. It's async iterables.
Oh, you got me. I was going to say something quite different, but well, anyway, it's all right. Async intervals can compete with Cyberpunk 2077. So for you to be this excited, I need to hear about it. So hit me with it.
Well, okay. You probably thought it was WebSockets. I forgive you. Anyways, so async intervals, for our async APIs in the JavaScript world, have made their way into C# with async enumerables. And as you know, those of you who know me, you know that I've been a huge C# fanboy for a long time. And this session takes us really deep into the C# world. This is advanced techniques for building with Amazon S3 in .NET applications. In particular, it uses all this cutting edge stuff from the latest versions of .NET Core and C# 8.0 with its async iterable interface. And what the async iterable interface does, it's the analogy of JavaScript's async iterables. And when you combine it with a Blazor application and an S3 backend, you get some really, really cool results. You have extremely, very little declarative code that does a lot of heavy lifting for you. You really have to see it for yourself. This is, again, advanced techniques for building with Amazon S3 and .NET applications. If you search for those keywords or an approximation of it, you're going to find the session. Then moving on, we have a new launch. Yesterday, we mentioned from Swami's keynotes that we have a new product called Amazon Health Lake. And this is really kind of the collaboration or the coming together of a whole bunch of different services to ease the workflows that we see in the healthcare industry vertical. And the session, Making Sense of Health Data with Amazon Health Lake, takes a deep dive into this. It talks about some of the compliance regulations and data storage requirements that are unique to companies that are operating in this industry. And it talks about how Health Lake as a service removes some of these barriers to help customers move more quickly, more securely, more compliantly. And then, of course, I know these are two features that are going to be exciting for you as well, Nick. We've talked about these at length on our various segments, whether it's keynote worthy or whether it's these recaps. But a set of related announcements here: SageMaker Features. One of them is the SageMaker Feature Store, and then the other one, Amazon SageMaker Data Wrangler. If you search for SageMaker, you're going to see these pop up really quickly. But the cool thing about these sessions is when we have Swami or when we have Andy on stage, they can only dedicate so much time because they have so much content to cover. And these sessions really kind of take you deep into one of these features. So if the tagline for these features sounds interesting to you, you owe it to yourself to check out the deep dive session.
Precisely. I wish we had more time to cover so many of the amazing sessions, but we started a little late today, so we're up against the clock. With our remaining minute or so, I wanted to close out with what is on the horizon. So tomorrow, obviously, the infrastructure keynote by Peter DeSantis is going to be extremely exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I know Rob's looking forward to it. We're going to be up bright and early watching that, taking notes feverishly. We will be on with a keynote-worthy summary of that keynote tomorrow, but we've got more what's next content diving deep with the service teams tomorrow. So if you've enjoyed any of that or any of these launches that sounded exciting, please, I implore you, tune into these live sessions, sitting down with the service teams that built it and deeply understanding the methodology and the motivation behind this. Without further ado, I know we have an exciting session lined up immediately after this, so I will not delay them any further. Stick around. When we return, we're going to have certification quiz show with Rudy Valdez, followed by an industry live session for life sciences. This is AWS On Air signing off for just a second, but stick around. We'll be right back.